He was already inside before she screamed. Not because she wasn't frightened. Because the blood hitting her floor told her screaming would get them both killed. "Don't make a sound," he rasped. 6 feet of the most feared alpha in the northern reaches, the Wolf 3 territories had collectively decided was cheaper to respect than fight, was collapsed against her bedroom wall, one hand clamped over a wound that was losing the argument against gravity, dark blood threading between his fingers and dripping onto her stone floor like a clock counting down something neither of them could afford to reach zero. She knew his face. Everyone knew his face. She had just never seen it look like this. "How many?" she asked. He blinked. Whatever he expected her to say, that wasn't it. 6. Inside the walls? She pressed her ear to the door. Boots. Coordinated. Close. Not patrol. Not guards running a standard rotation. Hunters. Her mind went somewhere very cold and very quiet, the place it always went when the situation stopped being manageable and started being survival. 3 minutes, she said. Maybe less. You need to run. I'm not running. She was already moving, wardrobe, wooden box, vials located by memory in complete darkness. I've been waiting 5 years for something worth fighting for. She turned back to him. You just bled on it. He stared at her like he had never seen her before. He hadn't. Nobody had. That was precisely the problem. And tonight, it was about to become their greatest weapon. Move your hand, she said. He did. She worked fast. The wound was silver compound, deliberately prepared, sourced from restricted palace archives that only 3 people held clearance to access. She already knew which 3. She already knew which one. Seraphine. Don't talk. They will kill you if. They will try. She reached beneath the desk. Retrieved a satchel already packed, because some quiet, watchful, patient part of her had known this night was coming long before he appeared bleeding in her doorway. There is a passage behind the chapel fireplace. A market cart exits the palace grounds before dawn. She met his eyes in the darkness. I know exactly who sent those hunters. I know every name in the network. I have 6 weeks of documentation that will destroy all of them. The silence that followed was enormous. How? He said carefully. Do you know any of this? Because for 5 years, she said, moving toward the fireplace, everyone in this palace looked straight through me. She pressed the stone. The panel swung open. Cold ancient air rushed out to meet them. And I used every single second of it. She stepped into the dark passage. Looked back once. Come. They're searching for one person. A beat. Let's keep it that way. Before we continue, tell me in the comments. Would you trust the Alpha King after 5 years of silence? And if you enjoy dark werewolf stories filled with dangerous secrets, Ruthless Alphas, Betrayal, Forbidden Power, and Deadly Kingdoms, subscribe because what she does next changes everything. Understand what she was before understanding what she became. Seraphine Valdres arrived at Ashvale Palace on a Thursday in early autumn, escorted by 6 guards and her father's silence. Lord Aldrich Valdres had not wept at her departure. He had straightened her collar, pressed a single kiss to her forehead, and said something she had carried like a stone in her chest ever since. Make yourself useful to him. That is all Luna needs to do. She was 22. She had read every political treatise in her father's library. She spoke 4 languages, understood territorial law better than most advisors half a generation older, and had spent her adolescence studying the complicated machinery of pact diplomacy because she understood, long before the moon goddess confirmed it, that her life would be woven into something larger than herself. The mate bond announced itself the moment someone inside Ashvale Palace was preparing to remove the king. Not challenge him. Not politically outmaneuver him. Remove him. The kind of removal that left nobody for the pack to grieve. She had been sitting on this knowledge for 6 weeks, turning it over like a stone, examining what obligation the moon-bonded mate of a man who had never acknowledged her existence owed to that man's continued survival, when 3 sharp knocks destroyed her deliberation entirely. She had imagined many versions of their first real conversation. None of them involved tearing strips from her bedsheet, while he held his own wound closed and breathed through his nose with the deliberate control of someone who had survived pain before by refusing to give it an audience. Sit, she said. Not a suggestion. Something moved across his expression, surprise, perhaps, at the particular quality of her authority. He sat on the edge of her writing desk chair. She noted that he chose it over the bed or the cushioned settee, a choice that maintained a kind of dignity. She respected that even as she moved toward him with no particular reverence. "How long ago?" she asked, nodding toward the wound. "An hour. It hasn't closed." "I know." She examined it without touching him yet, a slash rather than a puncture, deep enough to slow healing, positioned at the junction of shoulder and neck where certain rare compounds could be applied to interrupt the wolf's natural regeneration. She had read about such compounds. She had read about most things. "Silver lace blade," she said. Not a question. His stillness shifted fractionally. "You know compound wounding." "I know many things you have not inquired about." She moved to her wardrobe. On the lower shelf, behind folded linens, she kept a carved wooden box that would have surprised most people who considered themselves familiar with Luna's quarters. She withdrew specific vials. He watched her move with an expression she could not yet decipher. She had no catalogue of his expressions to consult. "Who knows you're here?" she asked. "No one." "Selim." His name felt strange and correct simultaneously in her mouth. "Someone just tried to assassinate the Alpha King in his own palace. Someone planned it carefully enough to procure silver compound weapons. Someone coordinated it with tonight specifically, 3 days before the Highland Conclave, when your absence would be both maximally destructive and minimally investigated. This was not improvised." The silence that followed was a different kind than the one she was accustomed to from him. This one had weight. Had something listening inside it. "No," he said finally. "It was not." "Then tell me what happened." "Completely." He looked at her. The winter storm eyes moving across her face with an attention she felt physically, the mate bond responding to proximity in ways she had spent years teaching herself to suppress. She saw him note the suppression. Saw him file it somewhere. "You're not going to ask why I came here," he said. "You can't go to the king's quarters. They're being watched by whoever arranged tonight. You can't go to your guard commander because you don't know whose loyalty has been purchased. You can't leave the palace because they'll have the exits covered and a lone alpha with a silver wound in the dark is manageable prey." She began cleaning the wound with efficient, careful hands. "You came here because my chambers are the one location in this palace that no one with ambition bothers to survey." A pause. "Because no one thinks you matter," he said. "Not cruelty. Precision." "Correct." Another pause, longer. "I owe you an apology for that." She did not stop working. "You owe me several things. Tonight is not the time for accounting. Talk," he told her. Not everything immediately. She noticed him editing, selecting, testing her reactions before extending further trust, but enough. Enough to confirm that the picture she had assembled from 6 weeks of careful observation was accurate in its broad architecture, if not all its details. High Advisor Brennan Salche. 3 border pack lords whose territories stood to expand dramatically under a new alpha. The southern diplomat she had noticed, an envoy for a power that had coveted the northern reaches for 2 generations and finally found a more economical strategy than open war. "You knew about Salche," she said. It was not an accusation. His jaw tightened. "I suspected." Suspicion without proof against the High Advisor destabilizes the entire Advisory Council and invites exactly the kind of power vacuum that your enemies require you to act. "Yes." She tied off the final wrap with practiced fingers. "So you waited for more evidence." "I was waiting for more evidence. And tonight they stopped waiting for you." He looked down at his bandaged shoulder. Something in his expression, some internal architecture, shifted in a way she could not quite name. She had the sense of watching a man recalibrate not just a tactical situation but something more foundational. "How do you know all of this?" he asked. "I told you. I know many things." Seraphine. Her name again. She was going to have to train herself out of the response it generated. "I have spent 5 years in this palace with considerable intelligence, unlimited access to administrative correspondence, and absolutely no political power to act on what I observed. I became very thorough. The summaries," he said slowly. "The trade dispute resolutions. The border pack meetings. You knew those came from me? I knew they came from the East Garden. I knew the East Garden's primary residence. She studied him. You acted on them. They were correct. But you said nothing. The silence this time was the most complex yet. She watched him navigate it, watched him decide, for perhaps the first time in their 5-year marriage, to say something true rather than something managed. I made a decision when we were matched, he said, about what this arrangement would be. What I could afford for it to be, given everything surrounding my position, my enemies, the instability of the post-war consolidation period. A pause. I was not certain I could protect you if they knew how much, if I acknowledged. He stopped. She felt the mate bond pulse once, warm and insistent, between them. You were protecting me, she said carefully, by pretending I was invisible. I was protecting you by ensuring you were invisible. The distinction landed between them like a stone into water, rings expanding outward into silence. She sat back, looked at him fully for perhaps the first time in 5 years without the protective glass of distance between them. This man, this complicated, powerful, apparently somewhat catastrophically misguided man, had spent 5 years engineering her irrelevance as a form of shelter. And she had spent 5 years building genuine capability inside the shelter he had built without consulting her. That, she said finally, is the most arrogant act of protection I have ever encountered. I know. You made me a ghost to keep me safe. Yes. And now your enemies have moved, and the ghost is the only resource you have. Something crossed his face. Not quite amusement. The situation was too dire for amusement. Something adjacent to it, wearing a different expression. Yes. She stood. Moved to her writing desk, the one he had vacated, and opened the lower drawer. From it she withdrew a leather journal. She held it out to him. He took it. I opened it. Read the first page. His expression changed completely. When, he said very quietly, did you begin this? 6 weeks ago. When I first noted the pattern in the supply requisitions. She watched him turn pages. Every meeting I observed should not exist. Every name that appears adjacent to another name in contexts that do not withstand scrutiny. Dates. Locations. The lunar calendar cross-referenced with the timing of delays in northern border supply chains. He turned another page. Stopped. This is Salce's handwriting, he said. On a document I have never seen. A copy. The original passed through the Administrative Correspondence Office 11 days ago, misfiled under routine supply authorization. I imagine it was meant to be retrieved before anyone noticed. I noticed first. He looked up at her. She had imagined, in idle moments over 5 years, what it might feel like to have his full attention. She had not imagined it would feel like standing in the open during a storm, electric and enormous, and requiring every steady thing inside her to remain upright. Seraphine, he said. This journal is enough to take to the conclave tribunal and dismantle Salce's entire network. She folded her hands. Provided we survive the next 3 days. He closed the journal. Set it on his knee. You came to my door. You are currently sitting in my chair with my bandaging on your wound. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, somewhere in the palace depths, she heard movement, distant boots on stone, the purposeful rhythm of a coordinated search. They heard it simultaneously. His head turned toward the door. They're looking for you, she said. Yes. She went to the window. Looked out at the moonlit courtyard below. Her mind moved through the palace's layout with the precision of someone who had memorized it not from maps but from 5 years of deliberate, unhurried navigation. There is a passage, she said, behind the chapel fireplace. It was used during the last succession war to move the old Alpha Queen. The servants know of it but consider it bad fortune, something about the souls of the old conflict still walking it. No one uses it. I know the passage. Then you know it connects to the old grain cellar beneath the East Kitchen. Yes. The East Kitchen storage receives direct delivery from the outer market 3 times weekly. The next delivery arrives before dawn. She turned from the window. If you are in that cellar when the market cart departs, you are outside the palace walls without using a guarded exit. He studied her. And then? Then you go to pack Everin. A pause. Everin has maintained neutrality in every conflict for 80 years, yes. Alpha Tessely Everin is also my mother's cousin, which is a relationship my father did not advertise during our match negotiation, and which I have never found occasion to mention to anyone in this palace. She moved toward the wardrobe again. She will shelter you. She will not report your location. And she has 300 wolves who owe allegiance to nothing except her personal judgment. The silence this time was different again. She was beginning to map them, these silences of his, the way an explorer maps unfamiliar terrain. This one held something she needed a moment to identify. He was seeing her. Possibly for the first time. Possibly in a way that rearranged everything. Why? He said. Why what? Why help me? I have given you very little reason. She found a dark traveling cloak at the wardrobe's back, purchased months ago for reasons she had not examined too carefully. She turned and held it out to him. Because whatever you did or did not do in 5 years, you are my mate, and this kingdom belongs to both of us, and I have spent 5 years learning exactly how it works and exactly what it needs, and I will not watch it consumed by smaller men with purchased loyalty. She pressed the cloak into his hands. Also, I am coming with you. Pack Everin's territory announced itself before any visual landmark, a particular quality to the air, a subtle shift in the forest's texture that spoke of a different alpha's claim on the land. Seraphine felt it as a kind of respectful acknowledgement from the earth itself. Tessely Everin was waiting at the territory's edge. This was not coincidence or supernatural perception. She was waiting because one of her border sentinels had tracked 2 figures moving through the creek valley, and she had made the deduction that no random traveler at this hour with this trajectory was random at all. She was 53, compact, and possessed the particular stillness of an alpha who had nothing left to prove. Her eyes moved between them with the unhurried assessment of someone cataloging a situation before deciding what it required of her. Seraphine, she said. Then to Selim. King. Alpha Everin, he said. You're bleeding. I'm aware. Come inside. Inside the Everin main hall, warm, firelit, smelling of pine resin and cedar smoke, Tessely sat across from them both and listened without interruption, while Seraphine laid out the full picture. Not the edited version she had given Selim in fragments. The complete architecture, every piece of evidence, every date, every name, every document she had copied and catalogued across 6 weeks of systematic, solitary investigation. When she finished, the fire had burned down by 2 inches. Tessely looked at Selim. Your Luna has done better intelligence work in 6 weeks than your entire advisory council managed in however long this has been developing. Yes, he said. I imagine that is somewhat uncomfortable. Considerably. Good. Tessely looked at Seraphine. The question before us is not whether the evidence is sufficient. It plainly is. The question is whether we can get it before the conclave tribunal before Salce's people realize you are not merely hiding, but actively preparing a countermove. We have, Seraphine said, a narrow window. The conclave opens in 3 days. Standard protocol requires all evidence for tribunal consideration to be presented by the 2nd day's end. She met Tessely's eyes. I need 2 things. Escort to the conclave, enough presence to prevent physical interference but not so much military display that it reads as aggression. And I need a way to get word ahead of us to the 3 pack lords not involved in this conspiracy, so they arrive at the conclave expecting the presentation rather than blindsided by it. Tessely was quiet. Then she smiled, brief, sharp, the smile of a woman who had spent 80 years watching lesser players mistake caution for weakness. You've already drafted the communications. They're in the satchel. Of course they are. Selim said nothing. He was watching Seraphine with the expression she still did not have words for, the one that had started in her chambers and deepened through the passage and the creek in the forest, and which sat on his face now with a weight that felt like something settling into permanence. There is one more piece, Seraphine said. The room shifted. Both of them looked at her. The beta, Tessely said carefully. Yes. Seraphine reached into the satchel, retrieved the journal, found the specific pages, laid them on the table. Marcus Kane has been funneling the king's private schedule to Salce for at least 14 months. The evidence is in the timing patterns, cross-referenced against known events and their corresponding schedule entries. The only source for certain logistical details is the private calendar. The private calendar exists in 2 copies. She looked at Selim. He was looking at the pages. His face held nothing that could be called readable. Something immense was moving through it, the kind of thing that moved through people when a fundamental support structure revealed itself as compromised. "Marcus," he said. Not to them. To the space in front of him. She gave him silence. Some grief deserved a moment, even in the middle of an operational crisis. Then, "He will be at the conclave," Selim said. "Yes. He will know what we're planning the moment he sees us. Which is why," Seraphine said, "he cannot see us until we are already standing before the tribunal." Tessely set down her cup. "Tell me the approach." The conclave of northern packs convened in the highland fortress of Greymere, a structure built into the mountain's face across 4 centuries, added to by every generation, now a sprawling complex of meeting halls, tribunal chambers, and gallery spaces where pack representatives gathered 3 times yearly to conduct the business of collective governance. It was, Seraphine had always noted from reading its procedural records, an institution designed by intelligent people who understood that power left unaccountable became predatory. The tribunal process was ancient and deliberately difficult to manipulate. 3 neutral arbiters, public proceedings, evidence presented under oath bond that carried genuine consequences for deception. She was counting on all of it. They arrived at Greymere's secondary entrance, a trade access point that Tessely's people used for supply logistics, and which opened directly into the fortress's lower commercial level, at the conclave's second morning. 43 hours after Selim had knocked on her door. Tessely had sent word ahead. 3 pack lords who owed her personal respect had each confirmed receipt. The tribunal's presiding arbiter, an elderly woman named Dora Kess who had served the position for 30 years and was known for the quality of her inconvenient integrity, had been informed that a petition for emergency tribunal consideration would be presented at the morning session. They had, Seraphine calculated, approximately 90 minutes between their arrival and the moment someone loyal to Salce would notice and alert the network. 90 minutes to end 5 years of carefully constructed treachery. "Are you ready?" Selim asked. They were standing in the lower corridor, 15 minutes from the tribunal chamber. He had been dressed in borrowed clothes from Everin's stores, clean, appropriate, nothing royal about them. She had changed into a deep gray traveling dress that Tessely had provided. Nothing about Luna about it either. They would walk in as themselves. Nothing else. "I've been ready for quite some time," she said. "Seraphine." She looked at him. "After," he said. "We need to." "Yes," she agreed. "We do." "After." Something moved across his face. Something settled. "Together?" he said. It was a small word for what it contained. Together implied shared purpose, shared space, shared weight. It implied an end to the arrangement that had defined their 5 years and the beginning of something that had no precedent between them, only the mate bond's patient insistence that it had always been there, waiting. "Together," she said. They walked into the tribunal chamber side by side, and every head in the room turned, and the 90 minutes began. The tribunal chamber held 200 pack representatives in tiered seating around a central floor. Arbiter Kess sat at the elevated bench with her 2 co-arbiters. The gallery was full, conclaves drew observers, political attaches, representatives of affiliated territories. And there, in the 3rd tier of designated seats, Seraphine saw them. Brennan Salce, rigid with a stillness that was its own kind of alarm. The 3 compromised pack lords, arranged with the spatial awareness of men who had been planning together, and were now recalibrating urgently. The southern diplomat, present as an observer, whose expression when his eyes found Selim went through 3 distinct phases in approximately 4 seconds. And Marcus Kane, beta of the northern reaches, who looked at the 2 of them walking into the chamber and had the particular expression of someone watching a door they were certain was locked open from the inside. Arbiter Kess did not flinch. "Alpha King Ashvale. Luna Vulgar Sashvile. This tribunal acknowledges your petition for emergency consideration." Petitioner approach. Seraphine approached. She laid the journal on the evidence table. She laid beside it the copied document in Salce's handwriting. She laid the communication records, the timeline, the cross-referenced calendar analysis. Then she turned to face 200 representatives of the Northern Reaches pack structure, and she spoke. Not carefully. Not diplomatically. Not with the shrinking economy of someone accustomed to being overlooked. She spoke the way she had always thought, completely, precisely, with the full weight of 6 weeks of meticulous preparation behind every sentence. She told them what had been built inside their palace. She told them what it was designed to accomplish. She told them who had built it, and how and why. She was named Marcus Kane last. The chamber was very quiet by then. Salce rose, a controlled movement, designed for the appearance of offended dignity. These accusations are fabricated by a woman with no standing to bring. The Luna holds full standing under Article 7 of the Pact Compact, which grants the bonded mate of a ruling Alpha co-sovereign status in matters of territorial security. Her voice did not rise. A copy of that article is included in the evidence submission. Salce's mouth closed. Arbiter Kess set down her reviewing document. High Advisor Salce. The tribunal notes your objection and finds it procedurally baseless. Sit down. He sat. Selim had not spoken. He stood at the chamber's center, watching his Luna dismantle an operation that had required months of coordination and considerable resources, and he let her. That was, she thought later, the moment she understood him most clearly. Not the midnight knock. Not the passage or the creek or the forest. This, choosing publicly to let her lead. Bearing witness. Making no attempt to redirect or absorb or qualify what she was presenting. It was not a small thing from a man accustomed to being the most powerful presence in any room. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict required 4. The sentence required 2 more. Salce would stand trial before the full pack assembly within 30 days. The 3 compromised lords had each, by the tribunal's 3rd hour, made the calculation that cooperation served survival better than loyalty, and their detailed testimonies had filled in every gap in Seraphine's already formidable record. Marcus Kane had said nothing. He sat through the full proceeding with the face of a man who had already completed his grieving in private. Selim spoke to him once, after. Briefly. She did not hear the words. She did not ask for them afterward. Some grief deserved privacy. The southern diplomat left Greymere before the tribunal's conclusion. Let him go. The evidence against the southern involvement was comprehensive and would travel faster than he could, through diplomatic channels that did not require his cooperation. On the first night back at Ashvale Palace, 2 days after the conclave concluded, after the formal reinstatement proceedings and the Advisory Council's emergency restructuring and the Border Pact's written confirmations of continued allegiance, Seraphine sat at the writing desk in her chambers and began composing the first of many letters that would be necessary to stabilize the territory's political landscape across the coming months. She heard the knock at precisely 11 in the evening. Not desperate. Not urgent. A deliberate, unhurried knock, with space between each blow for consideration. She set down her pen. Come in. Selim entered. He had changed. No longer the borrowed Evern clothing or the damaged formal jacket. Something simpler. He looked, she thought, like a person rather than a position, which was not an observation she had been able to make across 5 years of careful watching. He had a bottle of wine from the palace cellar. 2 glasses. He set them on the side table with the particular care of someone who has decided to do something and committed to doing it without excessive ceremony. May I sit? He asked. It's your palace. It's our palace. She looked at him. Yes. It is. He sat. Poured. She set down the letters she had been drafting and accepted the glass he held out. They sat in the lamplight with the sounds of the settling palace around them, and neither spoke immediately, which was, she realized, perhaps the first genuinely comfortable silence they had ever occupied together. I have a proposal, he said. I'm listening. The Advisory Council requires restructuring. The position of High Advisor is currently vacant. He paused. I want to offer it to someone who has demonstrated both the intelligence to hold it and the particular quality of using intelligence in service of something rather than power in service of itself. She looked at him steadily. You're offering me the High Advisor position. I'm offering you whatever position allows you to do what you've already been doing, but openly, with full authority, with every resource the office commands. A pause. I am also, separately and regardless of that offer, asking whether you would be willing to allow me to be present in your life in the way I should have been from the beginning. The lamplight moved between them. Those are two very different questions, she said. Yes. One is professional. Yes. The other is considerably more complicated. Considerably. She was quiet for a moment. Not weighing. She had already completed the weighing, sometime in the passage, or the creek, or the forest, or perhaps 5 years ago, when she had arrived here prepared to be a partner, and found the door closed, and had made herself capable instead of bitter. The woman she had become in 5 years of calculated, solitary excellence was not despite the neglect. She was not despite anything. She was entirely herself, built by her own hands, and that was not something she was willing to trade for sentiment. But sentiment, she was discovering, was not the same as partnership. Yes to both, she said. With conditions. Name them. The high advisor position carries genuine authority. Not advisory, executive. My decisions on matters within that scope do not require your ratification. Agreed. As for the other question. She met his eyes. Slowly. We are strangers who happen to share a bond and have spent 43 hours keeping each other alive. That is not a foundation. It is the beginning. Something moved across his face, warm, quiet, and entirely unlike anything she had seen there before. Slowly, he agreed. She lifted her glass. Then we begin. He lifted his. The crystal caught the lamplight and held it, burning ember in the space between two people who had spent 5 years in the same palace becoming entirely different kinds of capable, and were now, for the first time, in the same room on purpose. Outside, the moon came up over Ashvale Palace. Full and silver and patient, the way moons are, the way things that have been waiting a long time for the right moment finally, quietly, arrive. 3 weeks later, Seraphine was organizing the former High Advisor's documented correspondence archive, a task that required a dedicated team and considerable stamina for discovering how thoroughly Salce had embedded his network, when she found a file she had not anticipated. It was dated 8 months before the attempted assassination. Before, by her careful reckoning, Salce could have possibly begun assembling the level of external support the operation had required. It was a communication from Marcus Kane. Not to Salce. Not to any of the compromised lords. Not to the southern diplomat. To her father, Lord Aldrich Valdres, who had straightened her collar and told her to make herself useful. She read it twice. Then a third time. Then she set it down very carefully on the clear desk surface, the way you set down something that has just changed the shape of everything, and she sat very still for quite some time. The letter described an arrangement. A long arrangement, multi-year, predating the match itself. Her placement at Ashvale Palace had not been her father's negotiation of a favorable match. It had been his contribution to a succession strategy. The Luna installed not to strengthen the king's bloodline but to provide internal intelligence access when the time came. Marcus had recruited her father. Her father had offered her. And then something had gone wrong with the plan, because Seraphine had not been the asset they expected. Had not provided intelligence to anyone. Had instead spent 5 years building a record of the very conspiracy she was now dismantling. Because no one had asked her. And she had decided, without being asked, whose side she was on. She picked up her pen. Began a new letter, not to the advisory council, not to the tribunal, not to any of the names that currently occupied her professional correspondence. To her father. It was short. Lord Valdres, I am in receipt of certain documents that bear upon our family's involvement in recent events at the Ashvale Palace. I suggest you consult whatever legal representation your resources allow before any further correspondence with this office. Seraphine Valdres Ashvale, High Advisor to the Northern Reaches. She sealed it. Gave it to the courier. Returning to her work. The moon, as always, kept its own counsel. If this story kept you from putting your phone down, that's exactly what it was built to do. Drop a comment below telling me whose arc hit hardest, Seraphine building her quiet power across 5 years, or Selim appearing at midnight with everything suddenly stripped away. Your answer might just shape what story comes next. Subscribe if you want to be here when the next one drops. Because the world of these packs goes deeper, the The politics run darker, and the women at the center of every story are never who anyone expected them to be. Stay with us. The best is always the one you haven't heard yet.